Salutation. This is BIGJXXX. I'm here to dissect and deconstruct the late Charlie Kirk and Vince Ellison over their accession about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What you're going to hear from these two individuals is a play on propaganda and making statements without facts to back it up. See, Mr. Ellison is a black man, and his hatred of MLK is so vicious and vile that you have to sit there and question the sincerity and his care about his own people, the African American community.
Vince, talk about the damage, because we have to be honest, black America is not doing well today. Talk about the damage of the welfare state and how MLK's narrative and political activism led to the modern welfare state.
Yeah, David Garrow, again, he wrote about this in his book. Patrick Moynihan wrote this great study called The Moynihan Report. It was legendary. Patrick Moynihan proved that welfare was destroying the black family.
Not the Moynihan Report. Not the Moynihan Report that Daniel Patrick Moynihan has plagiarized from Edward E. Fraser's book of 1940 called Negro in America, Negro in the United States. So Vince, you decided to be disingenuous in your argument about the Moynihan Report. But you know what? Let's continue and allowed you to explain yourself.
He saw that black men were working, but the family was being more destroyed and more people were getting on welfare. And he said what's happening is these young girls that are getting pregnant aren't getting married anymore. So he told LBJ, we got to cut this out or the black family is going to be destroyed.
I think that people need to listen to the horse's mouth, not the horse's rear end. I think people might want to listen to what was actually stated rather than, hyperbole. Because around here where I'm from, facts matter, not opinion. If you're going to make a statement, you have to back it up with actual facts, not secondary information. Go to the horse's mouth, which is Meet the Press of 1965, December 11th, 1965 edition of Meet the Press, where Daniel Patrick Moynihan said this.
The first question is from Mr. Moynihan, from Lawrence E. Spivak, permanent member of the Meet the Press panel.
Here's a quotation, for example, from a recent article by William Ryan, a Harvard psychologist, who criticizes your report in The Nation. And this is what he writes, quote, "The implicit point is that Negroes tolerate promiscuity, illegitimacy, one-parent families, welfare dependency, and everything else that is supposed to follow." Now, that's the criticism he makes of your report. Now, how do you answer those charges?
I'm not responsible for the fact that he can't read. As E. Franklin Fraser said, and I quoted from him in some length, there is a lot of evidence that the Negro middle-class family, when it gets its opportunity, gets a bearing, is, if anything, more stern, more rigid than most. But the evidence is simply clear. Negro Americans live like any other Americans, and when they're forced into the ghetto and forced into disorganization, they have no more better protections than anyone else.
So he said, what we need to do is take the federal government and put the black man back in charge of his family. LBJ was all for it.
Reading is fundamental. Fundamental. Also is fundamental being an active, repeat that again, an active listener. Daniel Patrick Moynihan did not say that. In the interview about the Moynihan Report, He didn't say that. He didn't say that there was a program that would kick black women, kick black fathers out of the household. And since we on there, right? Kicking men out the household argument was banned in 1968 with the Supreme Court case, King v. Smith. You might want to look that up. You might want to look up King v. Smith, which was a Supreme Court case that you cannot kick the man out the household. You might want to read, Vince. You might want to read on that. And about the whole damn thing about fathers being kicked out. No. And here's another tidbit I want to share what Patrick Moynihan did say, because he was talking about New York. He was talking about Chicago. He was talking about the northern regions of the United States. Nowhere he was talking about the entirety of the United States in his when he's talking about marriages and the lack thereof and single parent households. See, if you're going to talk about something, make sure you got the accurate information.
They came back and met with LBJ, and the feminists in the movement said, instead of taking the federal government to put the man back in charge of his family, we need to use it to get the man out, because marriage is just like slavery.
What I'm about to show you is a clip from 1961. Since Mr. Ellison wanted to bring up feminism and the women's rights movement, let me bring you a clip what happened in 1961 and see how he's trying to do this, right?
Mr. President, the Democratic platform promises to work for equal rights for women, including equal pay. What have you done for the women?
Well, I'm sure we haven't done enough, and
this was John F. Kennedy at a press conference when he was talking about a bill. I think it was the women in the workplace wage gap back in 1961. I'll put the links of that in the description box, but he was trying to pass a bill. So what Mr. Ellison's trying to do is try to make women's live and women being in the workplace as an enemy of the civil rights movement. But I got some more to talk about this.
And instead of putting and fixing the welfare state where women could get welfare if they got married, they changed it to where if they caught a man in the house, she could get no help. And in one generation, the black community went from 80% of their children in wedlock to 80% being born out of wedlock. And they put the man in-house clause in welfare, and it destroyed the black family. And Martin Luther King Jr.'s fingerprints were all on it.
The picture that you see in front of you is Congressman Howard W. Smith from the Commonwealth of Virginia. And according to the book by Clinton Jacob Wood, Strange Bedfellows, Congressman Howard W. Smith, in the inclusion of sex decriminalization in the Civil Rights, 1964 Civil Rights Act, he was trying to introduce women's liberation language into the 1964 bill in order to sway some northern Republicans and some northern Democrats from voting for the Civil Rights Act, and which has failed. And the links of that is in the description box if you really are keen on learning about that. So therefore, Mr. Ellison and Charlie Kirk has been lying to you.
And Ralph Abernathy wrote, in The Walls Came Tumbling Down, he said that in the late 70s, he went to the black people in the civil in Congress and showed them how welfare was destroying the black community, how it was keeping 3 generations of black people in poverty. And Ralph Abernathy wrote this in his book. He said, and something curious happened. It pleased them to have 2 and 3 generations of black people locked in poverty because that's how they could control them. Ralph said that they were pushing segregation because this is how they could keep all black people in the inner city and could keep their positions of power in government. And that's when Ralph Abernathy said that he supported Ronald Reagan for president in 1980.
Are we talking about the same Ronald Reagan who in 1974 with his campaign partner Lee Atwater talked propagandized about the welfare queen when he took the image of a black woman, of a mixed race woman, and used a racist trope about her to slam and denigrate and disrespect black women? And how can you say that? How can you just say that when also on top of that you quote Malcolm X, who said black women are the most disrespected woman on the planet? Vince, you might want to go back to the drawing board about the welfare queen argument that Ronald Reagan created. And since we're on Ronald Reagan, right, most of our national debt was created under Ronald Reagan. Not only that, I mean, you know, because we became a lender nation to a debtor nation. We no longer capable of lending out loans when we are buying debt, particularly from China, in order to fight the Soviets. Yet that helped destroy the black community, white community, any other community. And also, let's talk about this too, the trade deals from the 1980s and 90s under Reaganism and Bushism and Clintonism. You ain't talking about the Rust Belt states. Why the steel states become the Rust Belt states? And on top of that, since we want to talk about African American Pacific, the drug war. How come there was cocaine, crack, and everything else was flooding into by the CIA to support the guerrillas in Central and Latin America? Can you please explain that? Because I guess you don't want to talk about that part.
No, what kind of silly, strange, bizarre, bigoted argument? In fact, I think it's the opposite, Vince. What I've learned over the last couple of years is pursuing the tough topics actually builds our movement. It strengthens our movement because the truth will set you free.
Charlie, they're afraid of the truth. They're liars. You know, I've been saying since you know me that the Democratic Party is controlled by a cabal of perverts, liars, psychopaths, and anti-Christian bigots. They lie. How do you know a Democrat is lying? His lips are moving. That's how they keep us under control. They lie. They want to tell black people that white conservative Christians are their enemy. No, the white liberal is your enemy.
Then, by that logic, right? According to your logic, right? Let's talk about your logic. Then how come in these red states that you live in, Mr. Ellison, state of Texas, how come we spent the fewest on education? And yes, look at the map, look at the charts, facts matter. Look at the charts for the prison. Now look at the charts for students, public education students. Anybody can look at even in your home state, you see why is, if the prison population is according to the logic of you and Charlie Kirk, is full of black people, quote unquote, but then you're less interested in educating said student, but then when these people come out of school or dropped out of school, you're more prone to spend more money in arresting them. Can you please explain that, Vince? Or are you just going to shout, scream, and buck dance for buttermilk biscuits?
The white conservative Christian will do nothing to hurt or harm you. It is that white liberal, like Malcolm X says, that is the enemy of all mankind. They are atheists, they're Marxists, they're full of hate and envy, and they use people for power. And they get some type of weird charge out of seeing pain. They have to kill people, they have to harm people.
Vince Ellison, can you please explain this? You know, explain Donald Trump's now President Trump's original crime bill, his crime bill ideas. Can you please explain this? Please explain this, since you want to talk about Democrats. This article was made after he became president. So please explain this. I'll wait.
And they use MLK and all of those perverts with him. There's a chapter in my book, 25 Lies. One of the lies is that the civil rights leaders were moral people. They were not. James Bevel, the guy that was in control of all of the marching and all of the organizing, James Bevel went to jail for raping his daughters.
Having unwanted sex with minors and children. Having unwanted relations with minors, with somebody's daughters. By that logic, how come he's not talking about this? Please explain that. Will you?
You saw what Jesse Jackson did after a king got assassinated. He slipped away, got a T-shirt, put fake blood on it, went on every TV show the next day and said he held Martin Luther King Jr. while he died, saying, "Dr. King, can you hear me? Dr. King, can you hear me?" And then Dr. King told him to take over the civil rights movement. Yeah, that's what Jesse Jackson did. This is, and Ralph Abernathy wrote about it, and the walls came tumbling down. He wrote about what Jesse Jackson did and told how they felt about it.
And what does that have to do with black people of today voting Democrat versus voting Republican? What Jesse Jackson did and Ralph Abernathy did and what the Monahan report did, what does it have to do with black people of the 21st century? In 2024, 2025, 2026. What does that have to do with us today? Nothing. It's emptiness that you are putting out. If you're going to speak on something, speak on the context of today. That's been my problem with you black conservatives.
About how they ran trains on her all night long, how they were drunk, and it was the worst orgy she'd ever been in. This man is supposed to be saving prostitutes. This man is supposed to be healing them and freeing their souls. This man is supposed to be baptizing every communist, every socialist, every atheist that came around Martin Luther King Jr. was supposed to have been changed.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So by that logic, right, since he want to talk about socialists and all that, right, so by that logic, we should, since we want to toss away the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, since Charlie Kirk and this man, what's his name? Vincent who? Well, anyway, his last name doesn't matter. So by that logic, we should also rip away the Pledge of Allegiance that we've been saying, because the author of the pledge or of our Pledge of Allegiance was a socialist Baptist minister. Let's think about on that logic. Let's think about on that logic.
Instead, he was engaging in the foul behavior. And now look at the black community. At the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in the world. Why? Because we followed a bunch of liars, hypocrites, and psychopaths.
It's funny that Vince, I don't know why I'm calling Vince. Vince Ellison decided to buck dance and shoe shine about immorality when the talking points came from this man right here. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. The person who spied on and demolished a lot of movements in society. This man spied on Martin Luther King. He spied on Malcolm X. And in 1969, around December 1969, he was part of the assassination of Fred Hampton in Chicago. But yet he wanted to call Martin Luther King a fraud, a this and that. But like I said, here is the original letter, ladies and gentlemen, of that was sent to Corrada to the King family, and Coretta Scott King read this to Dr. King as he was going to pick up the Nobel Peace Prize of 1964. But let me go ahead and read you the letter itself. It says, King, in view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with neither King, or with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor, and your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. White people in this country had enough frauds of their own, but I am sure they don't have one at this time that is anywhere near your equal. You are no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. You could not believe in God and act as you do. Clearly, you don't believe in any personal moral principles. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You at an early age have turned out not to be a leader, but a destitute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We will now have to depend on our older leaders like Ron Wilkins, a man of character, and thank God we have others like him. But you're done. Your honorary degree, your Nobel Prize, and other awards will not save you. King, I repeat, you are done. No person can outcome facts, and not even a fraud like yourself. lend your sexual psychotic ear to the enclosure. You will find yourself in all of your dirt, filth, evil, moronic talk exposed on the record all the time. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You are finished. You will find on the record of all time your filthy, dirty, evil companions, male and female, giving expressions to you to your hideous abnormalities, and some of them to pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness. It is all there on the record. Your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy, abnormal animal. You are on the record. You've been on the record. All of your adulterous acts, your sexual orgies extending far into the past. This one is a tiny sample. You will understand this, yes, from your various evil playmates on the East Coast and others on the West Coast and outside the country. You are on the record. King, you are done. So, should we take heed to an evil individual like the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, who committed crimes himself, demolished, stripped up the Constitution of the United States for his pleasure, for his power grab, bullied presidents since President, since President Harding on down to President Nixon, survived all these presidents? Man who was let's just say, the deep state. Should we take heed what somebody from the deep state said? Vincent Ellison. And you want to talk about the tree that the fruit has been produced. Get out of here.
And you will not be blessed doing such a thing. A tree is known by the fruit it bears. Look at our fruit. If the fruit is rotten, the tree is rotten. And the tree is Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights community.
If you're going to talk about the tree and that the fruit it produces, shouldn't you start with your own? Vince Ellison, shouldn't you start with your own? These are two examples. Look at your own leader. Look at the leader of MAGA, hanging a flag of the LGBTQ community. Look at, since you want to talk denigrate and disrespect the life and legacy of those who march on our behalf, fought for our civil rights, voting rights on behalf, are you going to speak on your boy, your leader, Donald J. Trump, standing with a known suspected sex offender like this? Since you want to talk about immorality, since you want to talk about, people's sexual deviancies. See, this tells me that you are not an honest man. You're just a hater because nobody looks up to you. Black America don't even know who you are. But you over here just want to, buck dance and shoe shine for those buttermilk biscuits and you got no lemonade to drink it with. Big J out. Oh yeah, in my next video, by the way, like, share, subscribe. In my next video, I'm going to talk about something else that happens at the, since we're going to talk about immorality, Maybe I want to talk about this person. Big J out.